All right, hello. Today I'm talking to Dr. Andrew McLean. Now that you really don't need any introduction, but I'm going to get you to introduce yourself anyway, if you wouldn't mind. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Kate. I'm wanting to talk about something or a topic that I haven't really talked about much with ISES. Most of my work's been about ethology and cognition and learning theory, but I want to talk about the outcomes of that knowledge in terms of changing people's mindsets, and in particular, the big change we've had in Australia regarding our Pony Club syllabus for Pony Club Australia. I'm on the national board of Pony Club, and it was one of my chief interests when I first came on the board to move in that direction, to bring Pony Club out of the last century or even the century before, from the days of the British Horse Society, which is a very traditional society with a very strong traditional background, but to move the information into this century. And so not really about changing what we want to do necessarily in Pony Club and the sorts of goals that need to be achieved, but really just looking at the information and how we might unpack that and re-put it together into a syllabus, and an interesting one that includes the evolution of the horse and various aspects of its ethology, such as its flight response and the fact that they're a social animal, and all of those things, and also leading very strongly into a modern understanding of welfare, that from the horse's point of view, what makes its life living and how can we contribute to that. So I'm going to talk a fair bit about the Pony Club syllabus itself and how it works, and also our ensuing motivations for inclusivity and diversity within that syllabus, because we have a large Indigenous community in Australia, and probably not many people realise, but many of them ride horses, and we even have an Indigenous pony club in northwest Western Australia. And so we need also to make our syllabus accessible to all of these children. And in fact, they're not always children, because much of our Pony Club people, learners, are adults, because we have a very broad range of age groups within Pony Club Australia. Excuse me. And so how do we do that? So I also want to talk about the challenges that we've faced, because it has been an enormous challenge. It's even been a kind of political challenge, in the sense that we've changed the syllabus and moved on into this century, but actually it's not really that much different, except we teach in single learned responses, and we give children the understanding that the horse doesn't do things because he wants to please you, but he does things in order to make himself comfortable and to also achieve his own motivations. And so how do we tap into that? And so looking at it from that perspective is quite different and can be quite challenging. And when I say politically, it's also been difficult, because our National Board of Australia is a skill-based board, and it's been a wonderful experience for me over my time. I finish next year on the board, and I have really enjoyed the people on the board, because they're so skilled, and that has been enlightening for me in so many areas. And they've been very supportive about this new syllabus. And I also must pay my respects to Dr. Portland Jones, who has rolled out this Pony Club syllabus. And the challenges that we've faced has been a lot of pushback because of the traditional world we live in. So in my talk, I want to unpack that a little bit too, and understand what are the limitations in understanding for this traditional world? What are the kind of moral precepts that people lean on when they argue for no change? And so that's where moral reframing comes into it. And so we can make changes in people if we understand those basic moral precepts that they rely upon. And that can be really valuable. So in moving forward on this, I also want to talk a little bit about my background work not only with horses, where I've been working from over the last 20 years, pretty much all of my winter, moving in around Europe from Finland all the way down to Switzerland with workshops, teaching people to understand about learning theory and training and welfare, and mostly dealing with behavior problems, because you don't really get much buy-in from the traditional people. You know, they of course think, well, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So they don't arrive unless it's a federation meeting, and then they do. And some of them become really motivated from that and continue on this enlightening journey about learning theory. Others, it comes because they had problems. And if you fix their problem, or they see some road, some pathway to fix their problem, then they also will join in. And that's been a really interesting thing. But the other side are the elephants. And that's been fascinating to me, working in 5 countries in Southeast Asia for the last 12 years, where I've been working with some of the poorest people in the world, particularly in places like Nepal, where the mahouts who deal with the elephants don't have any education. So here I am, jumping from Europe with the wealthiest people in the world, and usually with access to the best education systems, and supposedly with the ideal of education leading to rational autonomy. And then on the other hand, I've got the poorest people in the world who've never been educated. And the most bizarre thing is that those people are the most motivated to change. And I found that really fascinating. And I still don't fully understand why. But that's certainly what I've found, that they're much more motivated to embrace new ideas than the rigid people of the West. So that's been interesting. And finally, I want to also talk about changing mindsets. You know, how do we do it? And there are a whole lot of strategies. As I mentioned earlier, moral reframing is one. I've also been a huge admirer of Socrates ever since I studied by accident philosophy when I was becoming a maths and science teacher many years ago. And I had to study philosophy, which I didn't enjoy in the beginning, and I became absolutely besotted with it in the end. And Socrates really got into my head, because he was the one who really was pioneering by himself how you change mindsets, because he was roaming around the streets of Athens saying all sorts of heretical things and seemingly having shocking values to most people. And of course, engaging them in battle was never going to work. So what he did was simply ask questions and lead people through these series of questions, lead them to their own demise. So the Socratic method to me is a really interesting one. And so I've used that, and in my diploma with my students, I also discuss this and teach them how to use questioning to bring on board obstructionist or obtuse or just simply naive people, people who want to do well but actually are stuck in an old paradigm. How do you bring them on board? And asking questions is a great way. So for example, if a horse is shying, I might ask them, what is your horse doing? And they'd say, well, he's going nuts. And I'd say, no, but what is he actually doing? And finally, I would get down to saying, well, what are his legs doing? Well, they're going mental. No, they're not. What are they doing? Well, they're going sideways. That's how it comes about in the end. And so all the idea of going nuts and going crazy tends to disappear. And you can unpack what it is. So you say, okay, what do his legs do when he goes sideways? And they start to realize, well, he goes sideways and he goes forward and runs away. And maybe they even notice that his head looks in one way, then another way before he takes off. And by unpacking that, you can also lead people to understand that that's why he shies. It's not because he's just a spooky, crazy thing. It could well be because of his background. It may have a little bit to do with his breeding. That's certainly possible. But in fact, it's a lot to do with his experiences. And so we can get people to come on board that way. And in changing mindsets, I also talk about things like you need to become a good listener, because most people who know a lot aren't always good listeners. And you need to let people tell their story, and you need to engage with people in their story. and sympathize with their story to some extent, because it's a really important thing to them. And so I think understanding their background. So I think there's a whole lot of ways to motivate behavior change. And yeah, I'll delve into that, so I won't tell you too much about that. So that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about, are those areas and how it led me to, because it's one thing to say we need to change, but it's another thing to do it. And that's the important thing.
Absolutely. That actually sounds really fascinating. And while you focused on the Pony Club, there's absolutely something for every horse owner in this discussion. It's going to be a very interesting talk. Thank you so much for telling us a bit about it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not just horses, it's also people.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you want to change your partner's view about something, there's some pretty good tactics in there. Not that I found them all that successful in that.
Well, we won't go there.
But somewhat.
That's terrific. Look, thank you so much, Andrew, and we're very much looking forward to hearing your talk next month.
Okay, thanks very much, Kate. I'm really looking forward to doing it.
Brilliant. Bye.
Bye-bye.